Third generation Suzuki SV650s feature an exhaust system composed of several parts. The rearmost of these parts is a side-mounted muffler unit that's kind of large, heavy, quiet, and a little ugly. It's common to replace this muffler with an aftermarket slip-on unit, which attaches to the rest of the exhaust system at this point here. The wife wanted to replace the exhaust system on her SV650 with an aftermarket unit. She wanted something dark in color and small in size. So we selected the Scorpion Serket Taper exhaust with a carbon fiber finish. We'll go through the construction of this exhaust slip-on system from the right to the left. Here's the pipe that connects to the front half of the exhaust system. This pipe has a slip-on joint, which basically fits over the pipe on your bike. And then you tighten this down to compress the fitting to form a good seal to the bike. This is a stainless steel piece. It's got a couple of fittings here for a spring, which is how you connect it to the silencer can over here on the left. In between those two units is this device here, which they refer to as a flute in the documentation. It's basically something that forces the sound through from the engine side to the silencer side internally. You can see that it's closed off at both ends, but that there are holes which access a hollow tubular section in the center. So your exhaust flow is forced in through these holes, down this pipe, and then back out through these holes to make it to the silencer. That redirection of the exhaust flow generates a little bit of back pressure and also reduces the sound. You can see that it includes kind of a crush seal, like a surface here that goes between the end of this pipe here and the rim down on the inside of this pipe, inside there. So you form a seal that's good enough to force the exhaust flow, through this unit here. The silencer here is actually, you can see straight through it, and it has baffles on the sides. So it's pretty much straight through unless you have this unit in it. Finally, at the very end of the system, there is an additional sound suppression device. This one's pretty much straight through, but there is a closure at the very end of it. So again, you have that forcing of the gas flow to redirect into the pipe through these holes from within this pipe, and that redirection is what's going to generate a little bit more back pressure and a little bit more sound deadening. So this is what people would call a baffle or a dB killer. Basically just fits in here and is held in place by Allen screw with a lock washer. If you leave that in, it should run with the stock fuel map and not require additional tuning. We're planning to keep this in place, but I will show you the sound that it makes with and without this unit, but not with and without this unit. I'm only planning to run it with this installed. Assembling the exhaust system here is pretty simple. The manual is one sheet of paper. They just basically want you to attach the connecting pipe here to the silencer here with this flute piece in between, secured by those springs. I'm just going to take the flute unit and put it inside of the silencer unit first. So it just settles right in there. And then we'll take the pipe that connects to the bike. So it just slides right in here. You can finagle it just a little bit. There you go, it's in place. And then the last step would be securing those two together using the springs that were supplied with the exhaust system. That's how I'm going to install it. So you put the hook on one side, and then you've got to stretch it maybe 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch, something in that range. And it's a very stiff spring, so without a tool this would be very difficult to do. I'm going to reach around the camera and try not to knock it over while I exert this much force, but basically just pull that against the tension of the spring and then connect it to the tab. And just the spring is its only role is really to just hold this pipe to the silencer. I'll flip it over so you can see the same process for the other spring unit. So again, just mounting it to the silencer's tab there. And then pull. Okay, and there it is. It's secured. So this thing is pretty much in the form that it will be when it's on your bike. Currently I don't have the baffle installed in the rear, but I'm going to run it, get an idea of what it sounds like that way before I put the baffle back in. And then it's got this compression joint here that you can basically choose to orient how you think it looks the best. This slips over the pipe on the bike. Then once you get this positioned and this mounting pad connected to the bike, then you can go ahead and tighten this thing down to seal this to the pipe on the bike. Well, removing the exhaust system from the SV650 is pretty easy, at least removing the slip-on. It's connected to the bike at this point right here with this compression fitting. There's a 6mm Allen key here, which screws into a welded-on threaded bracket. So all you really have to do to loosen this joint is get a 6mm Allen key in here. You could use something like this, or you could have one that you stick on a ratchet. Either way should work fine. The other point you have to be working on is this point where it attaches to the motorcycle here. This is not the stock system. This is the foot peg removal bracket. This is a 4mm Allen key, and it's secured by a 12mm nut in the back. The original Suzuki piece, if you have that, will take a 6mm Allen key. So let's get started. First step will be loosening this compression fitting to the pipe on the bike side. So I'm just going to loosen this nut up. You don't really need to take this bolt all the way out of the sleeve compression fitting thing. Just get it enough to make this thing loose. So this should be good enough. The next we'll detach the silencer from the exhaust mounting bracket. This is a nut in bolt configuration, so you gotta loosen them, keeping one side secured. And this Allen key tends to want to strip, so I'm gonna loosen it by turning the nut side, which is a 12mm nut. Okay, so that's off. Once that's free, we can basically just work this bolt loose, and then the exhaust is, you can see, loose enough on the sleeve joint that we can kind of start finagling it off the bike, making sure not to pull the bike over. And there you go. That's all there is to it. But it's a pretty large and bulky unit. Feels like it, it weighs like 9 or 10 pounds, something like that. So as you can see, it's significantly slimmer, obviously lighter just holding it, and it's got a nice taper shape to it. Based on where the bracket attaches to the bike, you can kind of get an idea of how far it sticks out towards the road from the side of the bike, which does affect the ultimate ground clearance and lean angle you can hit before you start scraping this thing. On that particular bike, you're going to hit the foot pegs before you hit this, but with the original exhaust, I'm not so sure. We've lowered the bike, so kind of point this one at you and you can get an idea just how much further back. Here's the exhaust hanger, how much further towards the road the bulk of the exhaust hangs out towards. So yeah, pretty heavy compared to the new one. So we have a scale. Let's see just how much heavier it actually is. Okay, so the scale's booted up. I'm going to hook it up under the exhaust bracket hanger point. If it can stop moving, get a stabilized measurement here. Looks like it's about 9.5 pounds. So yeah, start the scale over again and weigh the new one. Okay, so it's just under 4.5 pounds. So from 9.5 to 4.5 pounds. It's about a 5-pound weight savings by just switching out the exhaust silencer. For the folks who want to run the bike a little bit lighter, louder, tuned a little bit harder, and may choose not to use some of the additional silencing pieces, let's get an idea of how much those units weigh. The flute piece that goes between the bike and the silencer unit is this piece here. I just hang it from the scale. Get a quick measurement of how much it weighs. It's not too heavy, just over 1/3 of a pound, 0.35 pounds. So that's the flute sound deadening unit between the pipe that connects to the bike and the silencer. The other thing that we'll get a measurement of is the baffle that goes in the back of the silencer, or the DB killer, some people might call it. I'm just going to hang the piece from the scale by this hole that you put the mounting screw to. So get that on there. about the same as the flute unit, just over 1/3 of a pound. So this scale's not that accurate. It's probably plus or minus 0.1 pounds. So the total weight of these was 0.7. I would take that with a little bit of grain of salt. Maybe it's 0.7 plus or minus 0.2, something like that. There you go. That's the weight of those pieces. Oh, installing the new slip-on exhaust is about as easy as taking off the old exhaust. The collar that compresses the new pipe to the old pipe is a 10mm bolt here, so loosen this enough to get this to be able to open up for the old pipe of the bike to slip inside, but not enough that you undo it from this collar, because it's kind of a pain in the butt to put it back on. So this is loosened up, I think, enough to be able to fit over the pipe on the bike. So let's try to get that on there. Just kind of wiggle it on until it goes all the way down to the pipe of the bike, and then rotate it up into position with the bracket, and it's basically ready to secure. So securing the silencer to the exhaust support bracket, in this case it's to the Evotech foot peg elimination blanking plate, which has a support bracket to it. One issue you may run into is that the alignment of the hole in the silencer may not be so good to the bracket. So it helps to have the bracket loose to give you a little bit of play. And then there is a little bit of flex in the exhaust system, so you may have to push on this, and you can kind of look down the hole to see if you can get those to align. And then you should be able to feed the bolt in through both holes. There you go. There's a washer that goes on the back of the bolt. And then this 12mm conical piece goes onto the back of it, and then you gotta torque those guys down. So this is a 6mm Allen key and a 12mm wrench to hold it in place. So it's got to go on. Let's just start cranking that down. And then before I really get it torqued down, I'm just gonna make sure everything looks okay. So I'm gonna get this close. Make sure the alignments of everything look good. This is not a lot of tension on anything. Everything actually looks pretty good. So the next thing I'm gonna do is tighten down the Evotech support bracket to get rid of the play in that first. A 5mm Allen for these bolts. Just do them one at a time because you're kind of getting this thing snug down into an aligned position. So this joint here just has that 10mm bolt, which I have hidden. I've oriented it so that it's, back here. So it's not really going to be on camera, but I'm just going to tighten that down. I think that's good. And then the last step will be tightening down to the mounting point here. 12mm wrench on the back. 6mm Allen drive. Okay, that thing's on there. And that's all there is to it. Exhaust system is installed.